She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't insane. No court ever sentenced her. But one afternoon, a nun looked at her and said a single word, sinner. And with that word, Mary Norris lost her name, her freedom, and the next 4 years of her life. She was sent to a laundry, not the kind with a spin cycle and folding tables, the kind with locked doors, barred windows, and women who hadn't been outside in decades. More than 30,000 women passed through Ireland's Magdalene Laundries. Most entered without a trial, without a sentence, without a release date. The last one closed in 1996, 2 years after Schindler's List won the Oscar. And somewhere behind those walls, there were children too, but I'll get to the children. The history didn't start as a crime. The first Magdalene Asylum opened in Dublin in 1767, a Protestant charity for women in prostitution. The idea was simple, a place to rest, learn a trade, start over. By the mid-1800s, several Catholic orders had taken them over, expanded them, built new facilities, attracted government funding. Some women entered voluntarily. Some nuns genuinely believed they were helping. But between the intention and what happened behind the closed doors, there was a chasm. Because by the time the Irish Free State was born in 1922, there were 10 Magdalene Laundries in the Republic of Ireland, and the women inside them were no longer there by choice. They were there because they were unmarried mothers, because they were too pretty, because they talked back, because they were orphans who had aged out of industrial schools, because a priest said so, because a neighbor reported them, because their families were ashamed. Mary Norris entered a Magdalene laundry as a teenager. She had committed no offense, but a nun told her, "Your mother's a tramp, an evil woman, and I hope you don't turn out like her." The first thing they did was take her name. Mary became Myra. The nuns said she didn't deserve to share her name with the Virgin Mary. She described what happened next. "When I went in there, my dignity, who I was, my name, everything was taken. I was a non-entity, nothing, nobody. I was nobody." I've heard that phrase before. Paul Stutzman said it in Switzerland. The words cross borders, the system doesn't. Because the Magdalene Laundries were not shelters, they were commercial enterprises. The women worked every day, without pay, washing, starching, pressing, folding, sheets, towels, tablecloths, uniforms. The laundries served hotels, hospitals, the Irish military, government departments, and private businesses. Real clients, real contracts, real money. Except the women never saw any of it. The work began at dawn, 6 in the morning. Mass first, mandatory, then the laundry floor, standing at industrial mangles, feeding wet sheets through rollers for 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours, in steam, in heat, in silence. Because silence was the rule. Talking was forbidden during work hours. Eye contact between the women was discouraged. Friendships were broken up. If a woman was caught whispering, she was punished. Extra work, no meals, sometimes worse. There was no clock, no schedule, no contract, because there was no employment. The women were not workers. They had no status the law recognized. They were not patients. They were not inmates. They were not employees. There was no word in Irish law for what they were. Mary Norris described it plainly. It was like slavery, worse than prison, because at least in a prison you could get a trial first, and you know how long your sentence will be. Worse than prison, because in prison you have a sentence. In a Magdalene laundry, you had a word, sinner, and the word had no expiration date. Some women stayed for months, some for years, some for the rest of their lives. One woman was admitted in the 1940s. She was still there when the laundry closed in 1996. 50 years, without a conviction, without a hearing, without anyone asking if she wanted to leave. And while the women worked in silence, outside, life went on. Hotels received clean sheets every week. The army got pressed uniforms. Government offices paid the invoices. Everyone knew where the laundry was. No one asked who was inside. But that's not the part that keeps me up at night. In 1993, the Sisters of Our Lady of Charity sold a piece of land in Dublin. During the property transfer, they found something in the ground. 155 bodies, women, buried on the laundry grounds, without headstones, without death certificates, without names. The nuns had the remains exhumed, cremated, and reburied in a mass grave in Glasnevin Cemetery, quietly, without public announcement. An investigative journalist named Mary Raftery broke the story in the Irish Times, and Ireland, for the first time, was forced to look at what had been running behind the laundry doors for more than a century. 155 women. No records of how they died, no records of when. Some had been given numbers instead of names, filed away like inventory. This is the pattern I keep finding. Orphan trains, 250,000 children with no records, Verdingerkinder, sealed archives, destroyed documentation, Magdalene Laundries, 155 women whose names were never recorded. You don't need to hide people. You just need to stop writing them down. But the Laundries didn't only take the women, they took the children too. While the women washed sheets behind locked doors, their babies were sent somewhere else, to mother and baby homes, run by the same orders, under the same rules. In Tuam, County Galway, a home run by the Bon Secours sisters operated from 1925 to 1961. In 2014, a local historian named Catherine Corless began cross-referencing death records. She found 796 children, official death certificates, real names, real dates. But when she went looking for graves, there were none. No headstones, no burial records, no plot numbers. In 2017, excavations confirmed it. The remains of young children, some as young as 35 weeks, were found in an underground structure on the property, a former septic tank. Not a graveyard, a septic tank. Infants buried in a sewage system, in a home called a home. The causes of death listed in the records: malnutrition, measles, convulsions, marasmus, a clinical term for starvation. Across 18 mother and baby homes in Ireland, approximately 9,000 children died between 1922 and 1998. That's 15% of all children who entered, double the infant mortality rate of the general population. Double in institutions run by religious orders, funded by the state, subject to minimal oversight. The laundries took the women, the homes took the children, and when the children died, they put them in the ground and kept doing laundry. Ireland could have kept looking away, but the survivors refused to stay silent. When the Irish government finally investigated in 2013, after years of pressure from survivors and the United Nations, the findings were blunt. 11,000 women had passed through the laundries since 1922, and more than a quarter of them had been sent there by the state itself. Not just by families, not just by priests, by social workers, by the courts, by the police. The state sent women to these laundries, knew what happened inside, and said nothing for 70 years. And when researchers counted the dead, Justice for Magdalenes found 1,663 women who died inside the laundries, nearly double the number in the government's own report. 1,663 women in a country of 3 million, dead inside institutions the state funded, used, and never questioned. Let me tell you about the laundry on Sean McDermott Street. It was the last one to close, 1996, in the center of Dublin, not in some remote village, not behind a mountain, on a city street. People walked past it every day. The women inside could hear traffic, church bells, children going to school, and no one came in and no one went out. Some of the women released from that laundry in 1996 had nowhere to go. They had no family, no skills, no identity documents. Some had been inside for so long they didn't know how to use a telephone. The last Magdalene women walked out into a world that had the internet, mobile phones, and budget airlines. They had entered a world that still used typewriters and rotary dials. They weren't freed. They were released, like an administrative error that someone finally corrected. This system lasted 229 years, from 1767 to 1996. And when Ireland finally investigated, in 2013, it took 2 more years before 814 survivors received compensation. Average payment? Approximately 40,000 euros. For a life. The Magdalene Laundries didn't need a conspiracy. They needed a word. Sinner, fallen, wayward. That was the entire legal framework. No trial, no jury, no sentence, no release date. Just a nun, a locked door, and a mangle. Mary Norris survived. She became an advocate. She testified before committees and cameras. She said something I can't stop thinking about. The shame is not mine. The church should be ashamed. They say now they're sorry. What they mean is, sorry they were found out. Sorry they were found out. 30,000 women in a country that walked past the laundries every day, past the walls, past the locked doors, past the sound of the mangles running inside. And the women inside those walls learned something very simple. You don't disappear when you die. You disappear when no one writes your name down. The survivors are still alive, some of them, in their 70s, 80s, 90s now. They remember the steam, the silence, the locked doors, the names they were given, and the names that were taken. And for the first time, someone is listening. When they opened the records, 155 women had no names, only numbers. But records don't only tell you about the people inside them. They tell you about what a country chose to remember and what it chose to destroy. In America, 63 million names were destroyed, deliberately, officially, and nobody has ever fully explained why. That story is next.